The capital welcomed us home like heroes. I hated it. But it wasn't because the people were insincere. Quite the opposite. They lined the streets as our company rode through the city gates. Merchants abandoned their stalls to wave. Children ran alongside the horses laughing and cheering. Women tossed flower petals into the streets. My people were happy. Safe. Hopeful. And somehow that made the weight on my chest feel even heavier. Because they were looking at me. Their king. Their protector. Their future. Meanwhile, all I could think about was the knight riding beside me. Kelo. The name echoed silently in my mind again and again. And again. The northern mission had ruined me. Before the journey, I could at least pretend my feelings were temporary. An infatuation. A weakness. Something that would fade. Now I knew better. Watching him with villagers. Watching him laugh beside campfires. Watching him throw himself into danger without hesitation. Every day had made the truth harder to ignore. And now we were back. Back to the palace, back to reality. Back to impossible choices. A little girl suddenly broke through the crowd. My guards moved immediately. Too late. The child reached my horse first. She couldn't have been older than 7. Her dark hair bounced wildly as she held up a tiny flower crown. For the king. The crowd laughed. I smiled despite myself. Thank you. I accepted it. The girl beamed, then ran back toward her family. The people cheered. Beside me, I heard Kelo chuckle. The sound immediately stole my attention. I turned. The knight looked away quickly. As though he hadn't been watching. As though he hadn't smiled. Unfortunately for my sanity, I had seen both. And suddenly the flower crown in my hands felt ridiculously important. Gods help me. I was hopeless. The moment we reached the palace, the celebration ended. Reality wasted no time reminding me it existed. Lord Oral was waiting. Several counselors stood behind him. None looked happy. And that was a terrible sign. Your Majesty. I dismounted. What happened? Oral hesitated. Another terrible sign. The council requests an emergency meeting. Of course they did. I glanced toward Kelo. The knight was already speaking with the captain of the guard. For a brief moment, I envied him. Then I followed the counselors inside. 3 hours later, I wanted to jump from the palace roof. The meeting had been exactly as awful as expected. Every conversation somehow led back to the same topic. As though the entire kingdom had collectively decided my personal life was their business. Lord Varric cleared his throat. The alliance would eliminate many concerns regarding succession. There it was. Succession. The polite way of saying, produce heirs immediately. I rubbed my temples, very patiently. The kingdom is not currently lacking stability. Several nobles exchanged glances. The fact that they thought I wouldn't notice was almost insulting. With respect, Your Majesty. I already hated whatever came after those words. Perception matters. And the translation to that was, some nobles still think you're too young. I leaned back in my chair, studying the men seated around me. For years I had viewed them as advisors. Trusted supporters, men who had helped my father rule. Now I wasn't so sure. Not after the conspiracy. Not after the rebel attacks. Not after discovering traitors inside my own government. Suddenly every face seemed different. Every smile looked forced. Every agreement felt rehearsed. The meeting finally ended after sunset. I escaped immediately. Ignoring further questions. Ignoring additional discussions. Ignoring my responsibilities for perhaps the first time all day. I needed air. I needed silence. Most importantly, I needed to stop thinking. Unfortunately, I encountered Princess Kiara. The princess was waiting in the palace gardens. Naturally, I should have known. Somehow Kiara always knew where to find me. And somehow she always arrived when I was least prepared. You look miserable. I sighed. Good evening to you as well. She smiled. The kind that usually preceded emotional violence. I heard about the council meeting. Of course she had. Information traveled through the palace faster than disease. And I hear they're trying to marry us off again. I groaned. Kiara laughed. The traitor. What makes this funny? Because we're the only two people in the kingdom who don't want it. Unfortunately, she wasn't wrong. We began walking slowly through the gardens. The evening air felt cool against my skin. For a while neither of us spoke. Then Kiara suddenly said, "You love him." I nearly walked into a fountain. The princess looked entirely too pleased with herself. What? Kelo. She continued walking. Calmly. As though she hadn't just attempted murder. You love him. My heart stopped, started again, then immediately regretted it. For several seconds I couldn't speak. Couldn't think. Couldn't breathe. The worst part? She wasn't asking. She already knew. I stared at the moonlit garden. Searching desperately for an escape but finding none. Kiara waited patiently and silently. Giving me nowhere to hide. Eventually I laughed. A broken sound. Because suddenly I was tired. Tired of pretending. Tired of denying. Tired of lying. Especially to myself. The words escaped before I could stop them. Yes. The princess didn't react. Didn't gasp. Didn't look shocked. Only sad. As though she had been expecting this answer all along. I looked away. Toward the palace. Toward the kingdom. Toward every responsibility chained to my name. And finally spoke the truth. The whole truth. I love him. There was silence but it came with relief. Which was unexpected and overwhelming. It was a terrifying relief. Because I had finally said it aloud. Not whispered to empty rooms. Not admitted it only in my thoughts. Actually said it. To another person. To someone I trusted. The world didn't end, the sky didn't collapse. The kingdom remained standing. Yet somehow everything felt different. More real. More painful. Kiara's voice was gentle when she finally spoke. How long have you known? I smiled bitterly. Since the north. We both knew it was a lie. The princess rolled her eyes. Try again. I sighed. Perhaps she deserved honesty. Perhaps I deserved honesty too. I don't know. The answer was frustratingly true. Maybe the hunting trip. Maybe before. Maybe from the beginning. Kiara nodded slowly. Then asked the question I had been avoiding for weeks. What do you plan to do about it? I stopped walking. Because that was the problem. The impossible problem. The reason every confession ended in heartbreak. Because love wasn't the issue. The future was, and there was no future. Not for us. Not for a king and his knight. Not while a kingdom rested on my shoulders. Not while enemies circled the throne. Not while duty demanded sacrifice. My voice felt strangely hollow. Nothing. The princess frowned. What? Nothing. I forced myself to meet her gaze. For once, Kiara, this isn't a story. The words hurt. Yet they were true. I'm king. Kelo is a knight. The kingdom expects an heir. The nobles already question me. The council wants me married. My laugh sounded bitter. If they knew the truth, they'd tear the kingdom apart. For the first time, Kiara had no response. Because deep down, she knew I was right. And that was the tragedy of it. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The palace garden stretched around us, quiet beneath the moonlight. The fountains trickled softly. The roses swayed in the evening breeze. It was beautiful and peaceful, and a lie. Because my kingdom was slowly falling apart. And because the one thing I wanted most was the one thing I could never have. Kiara sat beside me on a stone bench. For once, she wasn't teasing me. Wasn't making jokes. Wasn't trying to provoke a reaction. She simply looked sad. Which somehow felt worse. "You really think there's no future?" she asked quietly. I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it hurt. Kiara. The princess didn't look away. If my father were alive, perhaps. If my brother had inherited the throne, perhaps. Or if I were a noble instead of a king. I looked toward the palace. Thousands of lights glowed in the darkness. A kingdom resting on my shoulders. A responsibility I could never set down. But that's not the world we live in. Kiara sighed. You sound 80 years old. Some days I feel 80 years old. That earned a small smile. Then the smile disappeared. Because reality always returned. The princess rose from the bench. I won't tell you what to do. Good. But I think you're making a mistake. I stared. What mistake? She smiled sadly. Assuming you've already lost before the battle has even begun. Then she walked away. Leaving me alone with thoughts I didn't want. The next morning began with disaster. Which was becoming a concerning trend. The council chamber was already full when I arrived. Nobles crowded around the central table. Arguments filled the room. Several men stopped speaking the moment I entered. It was never a reassuring sign. I took my seat immediately. What happened? Lord Oral looked exhausted. There has been another attack. My stomach tightened. Where? Southwestern trade route. The trade route connected 3 major cities. It was one of the most heavily protected roads in the kingdom. An attack there required planning. Resources. Inside information. Exactly the things we feared. What was taken? Oral's expression darkened. Nothing. I frowned. Nothing. The counselor nodded. The convoy wasn't robbed. The room fell silent. Then realization struck. The attack hadn't been about money. Or supplies. Or territory. It had been about sending a message. Someone wanted us afraid. Someone wanted us unstable. Someone wanted the kingdom weakened. The same person behind everything else. The same shadow hiding behind the rebels. The same enemy we still couldn't see. I looked around the chamber. Suddenly every noble seemed suspicious. Every familiar face felt unfamiliar. And I hated it. Gods, I hated it. Because I had spent years building trust. Now paranoia threatened to destroy it. The meeting continued for hours. Reports. Security concerns. Military deployments. Trade disruptions. Every conversation led to the same conclusion. The conspiracy was growing stronger. Not weaker. And somehow they remained one step ahead. Every single time. By evening, I found myself pacing my study. It was a terrible habit. One I had inherited from my father. The room felt suffocating. Letters covered the desk. Maps covered the walls. Reports stacked in endless piles. Every document represented another problem. Another threat. Another responsibility. A knock interrupted my thoughts. Enter. The door opened. Kelo stepped inside. And immediately the room felt different. Lighter. Gods. This was becoming embarrassing. The knight looked healthier than he had days earlier. His shoulder was still bandaged beneath his uniform. But he stood straight. Strong. Steady. Thank the gods. You wish to see me? His voice pulled me back to reality. Yes. I gestured toward the maps. What do you think? Kelo approached. Studied them carefully. Longer than most nobles would have. Longer than many generals. Then he pointed. Here. Then here. Then another location. A pattern emerged immediately. My eyes widened. The attacks. The rebel sightings. The stolen supplies. Every incident formed a rough circle around the capital. This was not random but very deliberate. Someone was tightening a noose. Slowly and anciently around the kingdom. Interesting. Kelo nodded. They aren't trying to win battles. No. They're positioning themselves. The realization sent a chill through me. Because he was right. Whoever organized the rebels wasn't desperate. Wasn't reckless. They were strategic. Methodical. Dangerously intelligent. And they were preparing for something. The knight stepped back. Our eyes met. For a brief moment, the room felt strangely quiet. Just the two of us. No council. No nobles. No responsibilities. Only silence. Comfortable silence. The kind I rarely found anymore. Then Kelo smiled. Small. Almost invisible. Yet enough. Enough to make my heart forget how to function. Absolutely useless. That was what I had become. A completely useless king. Thankfully, Kelo remained blissfully unaware. As always, Your Majesty. I blinked. What? You look like you're carrying the entire kingdom alone. The statement surprised me. Because it was true. Painfully true. For a second, I considered lying. Then I remembered I was tired. Very tired. So instead I told the truth. It feels that way sometimes. Something softened in Kelo's expression. Not pity. Understanding. Respect. Concern. And somehow that was worse. Because it made me want things I couldn't have. You're not alone. The words were simple. Yet they hit harder than any speech. I almost laughed. Because if he only knew. If he only knew how much those words meant. How desperately I wanted to believe them. How impossible that felt. A knock interrupted us. It was sharp and urgent. The door flew open and a palace guard entered, breathing heavily. He looked pale and afraid. Every instinct I possessed sharpened instantly. What happened? The guard swallowed. Then spoke. And the world shifted. We arrested Lord Renwick. The room went still. Even Kelo froze. Lord Renwick was one of the most trusted nobles in the kingdom. A man who had advised my father. A man I had known my entire life. This was impossible. Yet the guard's expression said otherwise. I stood immediately. Why? Evidence of communication with rebel forces. My pulse thundered in my ears. No, this couldn't be right. Renwick wasn't merely a noble. He was family in everything except blood. He had attended my birthday celebrations. My father's funeral. My coronation. I trusted him. Gods help me. I really trusted him. An hour later, I stood inside the royal prison. Cold stone surrounded us. Torches flickered. Shadows danced across the walls. Lord Renwick sat behind iron bars looking older than I remembered. Smaller and more human. For the first time the sight hurt. It was way more than I expected. He slowly raised his head. Our eyes met. Sadness appeared in his. Not guilt. Not shame. Just sadness. Which somehow made everything worse. Your Majesty. The familiar greeting nearly broke something inside me. Tell me it isn't true. The words escaped before I could stop them. The old noble smiled. The smile of a man who had already lost. I cannot do that. Pain settled heavily in my chest. I closed my eyes. Just for a moment. Then forced myself to continue. Why? Renwick stared at the floor for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice sounded ancient. You are a good king. I frowned. That wasn't an answer. Then why betray me? The old noble laughed softly. A broken sound. Because this was never about you. Ice flooded my veins. The prison suddenly felt colder. I stepped closer to the bars. What does that mean? Renwick looked directly at me. Fear flashed across his face. Real fear. Not of prison. Not of execution. Of someone else. Someone still free. Someone powerful. And suddenly I understood. He wasn't the mastermind. He was a piece. A pawn. A servant. The realization struck like lightning. Who is it? You trust them. My blood ran cold. The old noble leaned forward. His voice barely a whisper. Look closer to the throne. The words echoed through the prison. Then Renwick reached into his sleeve. A guard moved instantly. But the noble wasn't drawing a weapon. Only a folded piece of paper. A letter. One final secret. One final truth. I took it slowly, opened it and read the contents. I felt the world tilt beneath my feet. Because at the bottom of the page was a seal. One I recognized immediately. One belonging to someone who stood close to the crown. Someone I saw nearly every day. Someone I trusted. Someone who should have been impossible. My hands tightened around the paper. My heart pounded. This couldn't be real. Yet the evidence was right there. Staring back at me. The conspiracy. The rebels. The assassinations. The betrayals. All of it connected. All leading to one person. One terrifying possibility. And as I stared at the seal, only one thought echoed through my mind. The enemy had been beside the throne all along.